Good evening, all you wisdom walkers out there. We are making it to the end of February, and this is Jojopahmaria Nsoroma with Wisdom Walk to Self Mastery, all months. And tonight I come to the conclusion of that with a show on the final of the 4 aspects of Truthful Transformation, which is Audacity. And I'm connecting that to Black History Month. I have a few more minutes before I start the broadcast in full, because I'm also recording live on Blog Talk Radio, and they're playing my theme song. And the way the music licensing is right now, I'm not sure if I could share the song. It's a Stevie Wonder song that I dearly love called Layla from his Songs in the Key of Life. I haven't figured out yet how to get YouTube permission for when you put a song into your video. So over the radio, it's okay because you're not making any money off of it, but because YouTube, you have the potential to earn income. They have to be pretty strict with the licensing, which is, the way it should be. So I just got to do some research, because it would be great for you all to hear the song at the beginning, just the way it does over the Blog Talk. But anyway, I am very grateful to be here once again. This is my second month of doing live stream on YouTube at the beginning. With my broadcast, and to have an opportunity to do a little intro to those of you who are watching and listening before I get fully started. I am really, really grateful for everything that has transpired this month. It's been a very interesting month for me personally. Filled with lots of change, some surprising things, but none of it, although a little disruptive, none of it to the point where I felt, my train got derailed. Just little side steps that needed to be made. But other than that, it has been a very good month. And I think it's heralding a really good March that's coming up for all of us. And, this week is pretty intense with what's going on the global stage. So it'll be interesting to see what comes about as a result of all that. So prayers, and more prayers as we continue as a species, as a human species, to figure out how to really choose love over fear. And as we all know, it really is a process and then a discipline. So the music is almost complete. And so I'll put my other earbud in. And in just a second or two, I will unmute this mic and start. Okay. Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Walk here on Black Hole Radio and my YouTube channel, Wisdom Walk to Self Mastery, which I'm streaming live right now. I am your host and guide, Jojopahmaria Nsoroma, and February has been the first of 3 fire months that we get in a year. And this is a mineral year, a year of clarity, confidence, and courage. And February, as a month that's so full of the energy of transformation, it was a perfect time for us to consciously be working on transforming ourselves to be more of the truth of ourselves. And so my 4 broadcasts this month have been exploring 4 aspects of truthful transformation, which I identified. And I link them up to significant cultural events that happen in America, especially may happen, of course, like Chinese New Year's happens in other parts of the world, of course. And so I've been focusing on Groundhog Day, Chinese New Year's, Valentine's Day, And then tonight, I get to focus on Black History Month. So I'll be sharing wisdom and insights on Audacity, which is the fourth in the four aspects, those aspects of accountability, vulnerability, time framing, and then audacity. Now, for those of you who may be watching or listening in for the first time, let me give you a little overview of Wisdom Walk, what it is. It is a personal development resource for your mind, body, and soul. My ministry is any pain that is not transformed will be transferred. So, the essential goal of my shows is to support listeners and watchers in learning how to release any pain that may be blocking you from living your happy endings in life, also called fulfillment in life. Every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 5 p.m. Pacific Time, I broadcast live on both Black Hole Radio and my YouTube live stream, unless I'm on hiatus. Now, if for some reason you can't access the internet to listen or watch, you can listen to this live broadcast over the phone at this number. It's area code 563-999-3089. Again, that's 563-999-3089. I also want to let those who listen to the radio broadcast know that the web link I provide on the Wisdom Walk radio page in my Facebook, and you may also get it through a constant contact email, that becomes an archive link for the radio. So if you're unable to listen live, you can listen later. And of course, with YouTube, even though I'm streaming it live right now, it will go up into my cache, and it will be available to you on my YouTube channel whenever you wish to watch it. So again, if you can't watch in its entirety, it will be there waiting for you. But right now, I ask and thank you to sit back, lay back, relax, and open up to this exploration of the inner landscape that I'm going to take you on, where you can connect to your soul and discover the true treasure of being human. As always, I begin my shows by honoring the ancestors. These are the persons we are beholding to who and where we are today. I'm not just talking about those ones that gifted us with love and support. I'm also talking about the ones who may have disappointed us, neglected us, or even physically harmed us. And the reason for that is because our souls grow as a result of both the good and the bad. And ancestors who walk the low road, who walk the dark path, when they get on the other side and get reconnected to the truth of who they are in that soul way, that non-physical way, they realize why they played the roles that they played, and they become some of the best guides that we can have, because they know what happens when you make the wrong decision, when you let love control your life, when you say no to love, and you let fear control your life. I mean, when you say no to love. So they are important too, and so I do include them. And the other thing is that as human beings, we all have good sides and bad sides in us. It's just which one do we feed more? Which one do we nurture more? Which one are we aware of more, right? That's what really makes the difference. So tonight, because it is Black History Month, and because I'm talking about audacity, I wanted to focus on an ancestor who demonstrated audacity, who was audacious and in life. And it's one of my non-blood related ancestors, but someone whose story, when I first learned about it back in my 20s, I was just deeply, deeply touched. And this is Josephine Baker I'm talking about. And Josephine Baker became the toast of France, where she ends up being a performer for the Folies Bergère, very, very famous, iconic nightclub theater, really like a theater. I mean, she was on stage. They were doing, it would be like music videos today. And she would wear these very exotic outfits, like this little banana outfit, which is a little banana strung together on a string around her waist, and she was doing her dance. But she ends up there and she totally affects the French culture. Women want to start losing weight so they can be as slim and svelte as Josephine. Her hairstyles they copied. She would put on her furs and walk her leopard down the Champs-Élysées. So that became a thing. You know, you got to get your little leopard. And anyway, so Josephine was just amazing. Now, she started off very poor, very hungry, out of St. Louis. And she ended up joining a minstrel show. She was very comedic. She had a great comedic sensibility about her. And she would do all kinds of funny faces and rubber leg dances and stuff. And the troupe got invited over to Paris. She goes over on the Queen Mary, you know, as one of steerage, way down under, but she rode on the Queen Mary across the Atlantic Ocean, ends up in Paris. And, you know, quickly, she's very smart, very enterprising, and she gets over there and she sees the opportunity, and she just, again, has this audacity. She just runs with it. She doesn't stop and say, oh, I'm this poor little colored girl from St. Louis and I can't do anything. She's like, oh no, I'm gonna be the toast of Paris. I'm gonna like rock this thing out. So she becomes very famous and very wealthy. She even had a chateau in the south of France. Of course, every man was knocking on the door after her, you know, because she was very sexually out there. And this was a time in the 1920s when sex was now becoming more out there, and people were coming out of the Victorian and Edwardian society, and the champagne and jazz was flowing. And so you could be risque. And she was. So anyway, but what happens that is really remarkable in Josephine's story is that she's in France when the Nazis show up. And instead of her running away as she could have back to America, she stays and becomes a member of the resistance. So she becomes a spy. And she would have these Nazis come to her chateau and she'd entertain them. And meanwhile, she'd getting information from them and feeding it back to the Allies, right? Well, finally, they get wind of it. They get wind that she's like, you know, she's really turning us around, right? So word gets to her that they're planning to kill her. At this dinner, they fed her strychnine. And so she has to eat knowing that it's strychnine. And then her staff helps her escape that night in a laundry chute. And they get her out and take her to where she can be safe. The eating of the strychnine, they were able to get the poison out of her enough, but it still did damage to her, and she was never able to have children, and that was a real heartbreak for Josephine. But anyway, she, you know, survives World War II. She comes out of it, and she has this vision of adopting children that have been affected by war from all these different countries, and she does. She has what's called her rainbow tribe. Now, clearly, Josephine was probably somebody never should have had any children, because she, although she had a good vision and a good heart, she, you know, she's a showgirl. You know, she needed to be on stage. So anyway, there were some troubles with the kids, but at one point, she was really down on her luck. You know, because you know, Europe after the war, it was devastated. It was horrible. She's really down on her luck. She gets put out of her chateau. You know, she's got no money. And it was Grace Kelly, who by then had become the Queen of Monaco. This is like in the early 50s. She'd become the Queen of Monaco, or the Princess of Monaco. And she bailed her out and took care of her in the south of France. Josephine eventually does get back on stage doing her thing. She had an incident when she came over to the United States where she was a racist incident that happened, and she was very outspoken about it and vowed never to come back to the States, and she didn't. And she lived into her 70s or 80s, maybe in the early 80s. And she actually did this comeback at the Folies Bergère in her 80s, and had on her cat suit, with a big costumes and stuff. She's this fabulous show, and people just loved it. They had a party, they celebrated her. She went to sleep that night and she didn't wake up. She was done, just left out. And, again, she was just really, really brave and courageous. And, she just never gave up no matter what was going on. She just continued to find a way to persevere and to thrive. She was just an amazing human being. So share that story with you so that you can think about either a blood relative or, like me, someone from history that you identify with who inspires you. And think about their audaciousness. Say the name aloud as I did Josephine Baker. And I'm going to call in these ancestors to help us with this fourth aspect of becoming truthful in our transformation. Creator, Mother, Father, God, Source, all the one, all that is. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your blessing, your mercy in our lives, and for yet another opportunity to call on the ancestors. Creator, this evening we're calling out to those ancestors who demonstrated audacity, this willingness to take bold risks, this willingness to step out in ways that nobody they knew had done before, and to be able to break through into their happy endings, into fulfillment in life. And so, Creator, we are so grateful, so grateful, so grateful for those ancestors. And we ask and thank you for having them be around us at this time on this planet when we are beset by so many challenges, whether it is what's going on in the environment, with the air and the water, with the ceaseless wars, with relationships between men and women, with the danger of gun violence in our schools. We need this audaciousness to come into our hearts so that we can take the necessary risks to turn things around and to really, really claim the truth of who we are. And so once again, Creator, I thank you. And ancestors, 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 I'm calling out to you and thanking you as well. Thank you for guiding us, for being with us, for loving us at this time and in this way. And so I say, thank you, Creator, thank you, ancestors, in the name of all that is holy. I say, Amen, Ashe, Ahoasa, Shinga Bismillah, and so it is. Ashe. Now, tonight, moving right along, I'm going to start off with a little bit of elemental wisdom and astrological stuff. We're really kind of getting a break, if you will, with the astrology piece. There's not that much that is going on. So we'll get through this quick because I do want to have enough time to really talk about Audacity and then tie it all in again with the truthful transformation. So, elemental wisdom for this week, which starts on the first day, that would be January. It starts on the day that January the 1st started. And that was a Tuesday this year in 2019. And so Tuesday through Monday is what I call the elemental week. And so this Tuesday is the 26th, and we have a water week. We just came out of a fire week. Now we're into water. Wow. So here's the opportunity. It's about becoming peaceful, getting still and meditating and contemplating. Love it. It's about reconciling any negative feelings by acknowledging them, feeling that pain, and cleansing it out by focusing on what is positive in your life right now. It's about getting yourself into or nearby flowing water and allowing the purifying energy of the water element to free you from feelings of anger, resentment, judgment, fear, and anything else that is disruptive and distracting to the fulfillment of your annual commitments. Remember those? The things that you said you wanted to see happen in your life this year? Right. Remember, God is breathing you. Call upon divine love to free your mind. So, of course, with every opportunity that shows up, we're going to have some distractions that show up. And here are 5 of them that you want to be watching out for. The first one is about ignoring or sedating your pain. Don't do it. Don't do it. Telling yourself that your problems can wait. I don't have time for that. I'll get to that later. No, no, no. Do it. Take care of it. Attempting to change someone. We can give people some feedback in regards to something that we may be seeing about them, they're not seeing about themselves. But we're not to do it from a controlling or manipulative or judgmental way. It really is offering up some information and then let it go. Let it go. The only person you can ever change is yourself. All you can do is just be a support to other people's change, but you can't make it happen. Don't feel responsible for that. Another distraction would be blaming others for how you are choosing to feel about yourself, because nobody can make you feel anyway. You always have the choice to shift how you're feeling after somebody has said something to you or done something to you. You really can shift it up. Sometimes some things are going to be harder than others, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it might take a little more time. But don't give your power away by making somebody else responsible for what only you can decide for how you feel or how you think about yourself, about your life. And then last but not least, another big distraction is using anger, rage, or judgment to protect yourself from other people's pain. Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a lot easier to, go into that anger or judgment when somebody has done something that you find unpleasant or disruptive or just not nice and crazy. But remember, only people in pain do painful things. So, being angry at them or being enraged at them isn't going to change it. So it's best to look at yourself and say, where am I angry at myself? What is this reminding me of? And really shift it up, get into the compassion. And just know that, again, whatever somebody's putting out that is negative, it's going to come back on them. It's going to come back on them. That's just how the universe works. And the same thing with you. So choose to put out loving kindness and leave it up to God. When somebody does something to you that is not okay, you can definitely be expressed about how it makes you feel. You can definitely make a decision not to be around them. But don't try to take on, I'm going to make them be different, or I'm going to make them apologize or whatever. No, just give it up to God and pray that they, find a way to transform their pain. Now, next week, March 5th, can you believe it? We're going into March already. Oh my goodness. We will begin a Earth Week. We'll be in an Earth Week. And I'll tell you all about that in the next broadcast and live stream. Now, astrologically, like I said, we're having a break because we just came out of that beautiful, beautiful full moon. And by the way, I did not know that was going to be a super moon. When I was reading and researching my astrological information, nobody was saying this was a super moon, and it was a glorious super moon, which I hope you were in a part of the country that you were able to see it. I got to see it, and it was just divine. It was just divine. Oh, super and beautiful. And that will be the time that the moon will be closest to the Earth this year. So that's really the last big super moon. But boy, it was just really a wonderful, wonderful surprise. So we get a break. We get a break this week. We actually get a break until the 5th of March. But we got some huge stuff coming up in March. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde from the 5th to the 28th. That's a time to think rather than act. And then Uranus is going into Taurus for 7 years, beginning on March the 6th. And March the 6th is also a new moon in Pisces. So I'll give you more information about the Uranus transit and historically what that means. There's some things that's, sometimes it's done that, and there's some historical things connected to it, but I'll give you all that good information next week. Now, I do want to remind you, astrologically and astronomically, about Chiron going into Aries. This has been a very, very anticipated transit. And it's really, really big because Chiron is that wounded healer, which I talked about last week. And so on February 18th, it happened. And he'll be in Aries until the 14th of April, 2027. So he's going to be around for, a good 6 years, good 6 to 7 years. The opportunity of Chiron into Aries is for us to heal our deepest wound and turn it into our greatest gift. So this is a time for turning, our trauma into treasure, our trouble into treasure, the wounds into wisdom, as Oprah Winfrey said. It's a great line from her, wounds into wisdom. So just to stay mindful of that, because of course, in order to heal your deepest wound, it's going to come up. You're going to get triggered. It's going to come up. So be on the lookout for it. Don't feel like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Don't get victimized by it. Go to work. Say, oh yeah, that's right. That's that Chiron into Aries stuff. Here's an opportunity for me to move beyond, move forward from where I have been with this wound, that I don't let it keep me back, that I let it go to where it needs to go to so I can go where I need to go to. Yeah. Good, important stuff. All right. Now, let me give you my overview for the meat of the program, as I call it. I'm going to do a review of Truthful Transformation and the aspects I previously talked about, which are accountability, time framing, and vulnerability. Then I'm going to talk about Black History Month and give you a story of a very audacious Black man, very audacious. And then I'll end with a good personal challenge. So here's my opening quote. This is from Martin Luther King Jr. from his Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1964, only 4 years before he was murdered. He says, I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I still believe that we shall overcome. Wow. Just love, love, love that. Love that. And isn't that something that you have to be audacious to believe, that these basic human needs can be met, that it can be met? It's a shame that as a species, a human species, we are still struggling to make sure that everybody on the planet has this experience. Yeah. So truthful transformation defined, it's about, of course, being more of who you truly are, not imitating someone else's journey, but actually being on your journey, the specific, unique journey that was designed just for you in this lifetime. Yeah. We can transform into anything. So truthful transformation is about transforming into the truth of who you are. Now, it's so important to be truthful in who we are, because we did come with a sacred contract. We did come with a purpose. And we made some promises, like, I'm going to promise to break this cycle of abuse in my family, or I'm going to promise to become the president of the first Black man to become the president of the United States. Like, we make these promises before you come down here. So the only way that you are going to get to those promises is by being truthful about who you really are. Now, what you do and what you don't do really does matter. And this is why it's so important to be truthful as well. Not only do you have a sacred contract, but that contract is connected to somebody else's, to somebody else's, to somebody else's, to somebody else's. And in my first broadcast and live stream, I talked about the films Crash and Babel, which I think do a really good job of showing the interconnectedness of people on the planet, or people in a community, in ways that we would never think. But the reality is that we are all connected by the web of existence. And so what we do really does matter. It really does matter. So truthful transformation is a way to stay in integrity with the great purpose, the unique purpose that you were born with, that you came to take care of. And it's interesting how we're wired, if you want to think of it in that way, how we're wired by the universe, by our God, in regards to purpose. Because when you're not on it, when you're not doing it, it doesn't feel good. You know, success has been translated as, grow up and make a lot of money and buy things that show people that you've made it. It's like that's what success is. But true success, success that is truthful, that is deep, is about being on purpose, living your purpose, because that's what brings us fulfillment. That's what brings us our happy endings. And if you're living life where it seems like every time you do something, you just end up in a ball or you end up crashing a wall, like things just never work out for you, the answer is that you're not on purpose. You're not connected to your purpose. You're doing things that you can do, but they may not be what's really right for you to do. So truthful transformation is about wanting to be aligned, wanting to be right with yourself, wanting to be right with your highest purpose for being alive and for being here. Because ultimately, life isn't just about survival. It never has been, even when we thought it was, even in the midst of a war, it's not about survival. I think that's why people really love the movie Casablanca. I mean, it really is about people, in really dire straits, life and death situations going on, because of World War II. But we find that in the midst of that are these two lovers, and who make decisions or making decisions that go beyond just, I've got to survive, but it really is thinking about the other and also thinking about the bigger picture in it. And there's something about that we all know as humans. It stays with us. We're connected to it. It has meaning for us. And so again, life has never just been about survival. We are here to do something more, something that affects other people in really wonderful ways. Yeah. So I looked at truthful transformation and thought about, what are some of the aspects of it? What does it take to truthfully transform yourself? What is required? And then I thought about the month of February with these wonderful cultural events that we have. And is there a way to link up those aspects with the events? And I think I worked it out decently. I hope you agree with me. And so the first cultural event that I really love is Groundhog Day. That February 2nd, we get the opportunity to open up and say, hey, is spring coming in 6 weeks, or do we get 6 more weeks of bad weather? What's going on here? We're going to have an early spring. What's going to happen? And it's just a wonderful way to grow our consciousness about, the winter's not going to last. You're not going to have to stay in this. You are going to, move forward. You're going to evolve. And so I use the movie Groundhog Day to talk about accountability. And this is about basically how we need to take account of where we're at in life, how we're doing, what we're doing, how we're treating ourselves, how we're being with ourselves. And this is the basics of self-mastery. Because if we don't take account, we're not going to change. The change doesn't happen to us. I know people who have been through some really serious illnesses or injuries that before these things happen, they were miserable. And they go through that, and you think, oh, that's God calling them closer. So their heart is going to get softer and they're going to open up. They don't do it. Like, ain't happening. Um, so, sometimes it takes a lot more for people to turn around, to, become soft and vulnerable, to open up. But if you're not even taking account of your life, if you're not becoming accountable for your misery, if you're making it be about other people or other things, then you don't have the power to shift it around. And we see that clearly in the movie at the beginning, but by the end of the movie, we see through the power of love, this man has the lead character, he's taken account of his life and he's decided, I want to become the truth of who I am. So I'm going to take on learning new things, learning things that are going to help me do that. And at the end of the movie, we see he learned a lot. He's become a lot. And he becomes fulfilled at the end. He has this happy ending with love and with life by taking account. So being accountable is very, very important, to take account. And it's hard to do that. I mean, it was hard for him to have to really look at himself, really look at why he was so miserable, and to realize it had nothing to do with the people around him. It was all about him. Yeah. That's taking account. So that's one of the, I think, a very important and first steps to truthful transformation. You have to be willing to take account and to be responsible, to be accountable to yourself for what you're doing, not doing. After that, and using the wonderful, wonderful, very complex and very multi-layered formulas of the Chinese astrology and Chinese New Year's, I talked about time framing. And time framing is really important to truthful transformation because it gives you the opportunity to grow your consciousness, to become even more aware of who you are, why you are, what you're doing, and within the concept of a timing. Because the reality is that, yes, your spirit is eternal. Your spirit will go on forever. We can't even imagine how long. But your timing as a human being in a physical body has a beginning and it has an end. And so to become your truthful self, you're going to have to do it within a time frame, right? Within a time frame. Now, you can't really dictate the exact timing of when you're going to become true. But you can say, wow, I've got this time, and this time I'm going to make really meaningful so that I'm aware of how much further along I'm going to get. And this is also what happens in the movie Groundhog Day. He really goes into time framing, even though he's living the same day over and over and over, but he has a consciousness about, okay, over these next 24 hours, I'm going to do this. I'm going to attempt to do this. He's setting intentions, right? So the time framing from the Chinese New Year's that I emphasized was how this wonderful calendar that the Chinese use, using these 12 zodiacal animals and giving the animals meaning in regards to basic personality traits, basic purpose. Like the rat has a different purpose in life as compared to a horse, as compared to a rooster. And so taking those animals and their traits and actually laying it over an entire year, I think is just delicious. And so 2019, we're in what's called an Earth Pig year. Now, they also apply the 5 elements to each of the animals. So you get the aspects of the animals, but then you also get the aspects of their element, their natural element. And so I love that this also teaches us the multi-layered parts of ourselves, that we're not simple. We're pretty complex. We're pretty complex beings. What we have to do is pretty simple, which is choose and love over fear. But the journey to get there, it's gonna be a challenge. And so the Chinese have mapped out a 60-year process that takes you through all of the animals and all of their elemental energies. And so the understanding is that by the time you reach the age of 60, you are considered a wise elder because you've been around the block, you've been around the whole wheel. And so if we think about that time framing, that within 60 years that you should have wisdom, I think that's a really important thing to aspire to. Or if you're beyond 60, to know, wow, wait a minute, I really do have some knowledge here. I do have some wisdom. Let me put it to good use. Let me stop trying to be something that I'm not supposed to be, or have something that I was never supposed to have, you know? And let me not let this consumer culture make me think that I'm supposed to be 17 for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be a Peter Pan or Peter Panda. I need to let that go, and I need to really embrace the truth of who I am in every moment, in every year. So I could go on and on and on and on about the Chinese New Year's and what it's related to and all that good information. And I did give you a personal challenge in that broadcast. I said, identify what part of the 60-year cycle you're in according to the Chinese calendar. What about your birth animal and seasonal element resonates with you and why? Again, just to become more clear, to see what's going on. I also asked, what would you like to shift about your life? And what is your time frame for making that shift? Yeah. So again, truthful transformation, you have to take accountability, you have to take account of your life, but you also have to put it into a time frame. You can't just think it's just going to happen without you growing your consciousness about when it can happen. And you take that on, you set those intentions. Now, last week, I talked about vulnerability and associated that with Valentine's Day. And it just makes sense, right? Love means we're going to be vulnerable because at first it may be, I don't know if the person can love me back, but I love them and I want to be with them. But can they be with me? There's so much vulnerability in that. And I made reference to Brene Brown's work, the professor from Texas who has done a wonderful TED Talk, very popular on YouTube, easy to get, and who's written several books based on her social research about, feelings and vulnerability and, the power to take risks, about courage. Really, really good stuff. And so there's power in vulnerability. It's not about being weak or letting people walk all over you or getting your heart broken. It really is about letting go of denying or numbing pain. It's about letting others see your truth without you thinking that you are doing something wrong. It's about being willing to be messy when learning how to transform your pain. It's about being willing not to know and letting go of having to be right. And I said, what if Valentine's Day is truly designed to put attention on wholeheartedness, taking the risk of giving, even though you may not receive back in return, learning the awesome power of loving yourself enough to share it and accepting that it may not be returned, but if it is, wow. Your softness is your strength, I talked about, and that's being able to receive in order to experience fulfillment. You gotta be open to it. So now we get to talk audacity, this final aspect in truthful transformation. Audacity is basically that willingness to take bold risks, like Josephine Baker. Within audacity is clarity, confidence, and courage, which is the theme for this year, right? So this is a year of audaciousness. Now, audacity does have a definition that is a little negative, and that is she had the audacity to ask me what my name was, or something like that. She had the nerve, it's like that when somebody's audacious. So in English language, it can be used in that way. But for my purposes, I'm doing the loving definition of audacity, which again is that willingness to take risk. And I want to share with you about Black History Month and a very audacious Black American that not many people probably know about. I know I didn't, and so glad that I did. So, first of all, Black History Month, it was born out of the willingness and the vision of Mr. Carter G. Woodson, who was born in 1875 and died in 1950. He was a historian and he had a master's from the University of Chicago and a PhD from Harvard. Can you imagine? At the time he was born, 1875, so that means that was like around 1900 that he might have been at Harvard. Just unbelievable. According to the way many historians taught the nation's past, African Americans were barely part of the story. And a narrative that, and it says that a narrative that Woodson knew was not true. In other words, like he was always a historian. He was like, wait a minute, Black people done done stuff in this country. Why aren't we talking about that in schools? And so in 1915, he and his partner, Jesse E. Moreland, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And of course, it's been renamed as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or the ASALH. And the organization mission was to promote studying Black history as a discipline and celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans. A quote from Mr. Woodson is, "If a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated." So very, very important work. It was in 1926 that Woodson and the ASALH launched a Negro History Week. So it only started out as a week to bring attention to his mission and help school systems coordinate their focus on the topic. Woodson chose the second week of February because it encompassed both Frederick Douglass's birthday, which is February the 14th, and Abraham Lincoln's birthday, which is February the 12th. So that's why Black History Month exists and why it's in the month of February. Now, something else that probably a lot of people don't know is that Black History Month is not only celebrated here in the United States by this branch of the diaspora, but it's also celebrated internationally in Canada, Ireland, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of diasporic Africans in those areas, but they give, Black History Month in the United States as to what kicked it off. So that's really important to know that it has that international impact. So here's the audacious story on Black history that I want to focus on. Henry Ossian Flipper, and I think I'm saying his name right. It could be pronounced Ocean because it's Ossian, but I'll call him Ossian. Henry Ossian Flipper. He was a former slave and the first Black cadet to graduate from West Point in 1877. Yeah, like, what is that, about 12 years after the end of the Civil War. Just unbelievable, just amazing. So I did some research that I'll share with you about his story because it's just amazing. So on June 14th, 1877, only 12 years after the end of the Civil War, Henry Ossian Flipper was born into slavery. And Henry Ossian Flipper, who was born into slavery in 1856. Can you imagine? Oh my God. He became the first African American to graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point. This was despite the fact that he was the fifth African American appointed to the academy. Now, he was able to persevere despite strenuous, stressful, and hostile environment. Because can you imagine? I mean, just like, oh my God. After graduation, he became a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army and was appointed to the 10th Cavalry. There, he became the first African American to command Black soldiers in the United States Army. Prior to him, most African American regiments were led by Caucasian or white commanders. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the 10th Cavalry. It started in 1866, the year after the end of the Civil War, and it went until 1944. It was one of the original six regiments of the regular army set aside for Black enlisted men. So, the army was totally segregated. These were authorized by Congress in the act in 1866, reorganizing the Army for post-Civil War service, mainly against Native or First Nations people in the West. So the 10th Cavalry, it was a horse cavalry regiment. It didn't see any action in World War II, and it was deactivated in North Africa in May of 1944. With its personnel transferred to other units. So it was just amazing, though, that it stayed all of that time. Yeah. So that's a little bit about the 10th Cavalry. So something else about Henry Ossian Flipper that's interesting. He was born in Thomasville, Georgia, on March 21st, 1856. He was the eldest of 5 sons to Isabella and Festus Flipper. He was educated at Atlanta University, Clark, Atlanta, and by the American Missionary Association prior to his appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, which you can't even imagine how all of this happened. That's why I know there's a God, because this is like an incredible story. And they have a word about here that his brothers, did very well in their careers as well. Now, he gets dismissed, like court-martialed out of the Army in June of 1982. Interesting. So here's what happened. This was after being found innocent, even after he was found innocent of the embezzlement charges he was on trial for. Yet they found him guilty of conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Many believe that these charges were levied on him by Colonel William Rufus Shafter due to his dislike for officers of African descent in the military, and that Colonel Shafter may have even set Lieutenant Flipper up. Flipper adamantly denied these charges even after being dismissed and appealed the decision 9 times without success. In 1976, however, 36 years after his death, the Department of the Army finally converted his dismissal record to an honorable discharge. Then, in 1999, 59 years after his death, he was fully pardoned by President Bill Clinton after further lobbying was made on his behalf. Wow, you just can't make this stuff up. There is currently a bust of him at West Point, which I would love to see. Also at Leavenworth Fort in Kansas, because it was out in Kansas. And these were the 10th Cavalry was basically the Buffalo Soldiers too. So they were stationed out in Kansas. Also interesting is that after he, gets out and he leaves the Army, no, wait, this is important. While he was still in the Army, he did some engineering that even an engineering officer trained at the Heidelberg University in Germany couldn't take care of. They called it Flipper's Ditch, because what was going on is that they had these pools of stagnant water at the fort. And so there was malaria because of the mosquitoes. Nobody could figure out how to drain this ditch. Well, he figured out the proper drainage for the ditch. And it says this system became known as Flipper's Ditch and is still in place today. It helps to control floods and erosion in the area. So, clearly the man was just genius, absolutely genius. Now, during his lifetime, he published several books, one called The Colored Cadet at West Point, and another one, The Black Frontiersman, The Memoirs of Henry O. Flipper, first Black graduate of West Point. He also translated Mexican land laws. Do you love it? He had spent time in New Mexico. They called it New Spain. Anyway, he was just absolutely brilliant. born into slavery and doing all this. Now, despite having his military career taken from him, Lieutenant Flipper still managed to have a distinguished career. He is widely considered the first African American civil and mining engineer. He served in Washington, D.C. as consultant to the Senate Committee on Mexican Relations and as an assistant to the Secretary of the Interior, Albert W. Fall. Furthermore, he was a member of the Association of Arizona Civil Engineers, the National Geographic Society, and the Southwest Society of Archaeological Institute of America. He died in 1940 on May 3rd after suffering a heart attack. And he is buried in Thomasville, Georgia, beside his mother and father. He's not at one of the military cemeteries. That's because he had a dishonorable discharge and they didn't get around to fixing it until 36 years after his death. But wow. You talk about audacity. Can you imagine? Because I can't imagine coming up out of slavery, being in Georgia, and to take on putting oneself into a situation like at West Point, and going through what he went through, and then getting railroaded in that way by that racist, bigoted colonel. And then coming out, not being a victim, but saying, okay, let's see what I can do. And ending up, being a consultant to the Department of the Interior and all this stuff. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. Audacious, being willing to take the risk. He just never stopped. Like Josephine Baker, he just never stopped taking the risk. It was almost like he was propelled to keep going despite what was going on outside of him, despite that people were, had it in for him, that he was being victimized. But he didn't believe he was a victim, because otherwise he couldn't have written the books and done all that stuff. I mean, he was like, no, he kept going. He kept going. Truthful transformation. Truthful transformation. And, he did his engineering work and, did what he was supposed to do, did what he needed to do. Wow, Henry, just amazing. And so, just another wonderful, inspiring example about, taking on, getting ourselves to where it is that we really are supposed to be, despite whatever challenges can show up. Taking account of ourselves, being mindful of the time frame, which I'm sure Henry did. He was very mindful of the time frame of things. He used his time wisely. Very purposefully and very wisely. Yeah, he was not a victim to time. Vulnerability, being able to feel that pain and transform it and let it go. Not holding on to resentments, but being willing to continue to put himself around white people and do his work and do what it is that he came to do. Clearly, he distinguished between people like the Colonel and then folks who could accept him and could see the genius in him and who supported it. And then that audacity, again, just really being willing to take the risk. So I hope that this information in this month of February has been of service to you. I hope that it helps spark in you, if you are on the edge of taking a risk, to know that you just need to be willing. And the help will show up, the support will show up. Henry couldn't have done any of this if he didn't have support. And it seemed like clearly his parents were able to give that to him, his family, but also his greater order and direction, which I know he called on. I know he was calling on that all the time. So I come to the close of this show, and I want to first start off by thanking my wonderful engineer, Miss Yvette Parker, for Black Hole Radio, for my Blog Talk broadcast. And to her and her family and all of the Be Well members, thank you, thank you, thank you for what you do to make sure that I can broadcast every week. I want to shout out to all my regular listeners, to Miss Sarah, my #1 fan, and to Miss Carmen Ray, who encouraged me to YouTube stream. Thank you so much, Carmen. I really appreciate your support, your vision. Your vision. You're quite a visionary, and you love helping women entrepreneurs, and you're just masterful at that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. To all of those who have wisdom walk with me, and you know who you are. To my family, to my spiritual kin, to my transformational leadership colleagues, and medicine brothers and sisters all around the world, those who are taking on this good work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I couldn't do this without your listenership, without your love and support. Now, next week, my month-long spills will focus on renewing yourself, mind, body, and spirit, because March is a nature month and it's also a time of spring. So it makes sense that after we've focused on truthful transformation, that we begin to apply it. How are we going to renew ourselves? And last but not least, I want to thank my God, my ancestors, my spirit guides, my loving entities, everything that walks with me, keeps my head to the sky, my feet to the ground, and my heart open to do this work with and for all of you. Please have a wonderful, wonderful water week. Don't forget to get by that water or in that water. Let it flow, let it flow, let it flow. And most importantly, please remember that you are not disposable. You are divine. Good night now.